Stick out. The following podcast contains movie spoilers, unpopular opinions, outdated pop cultural references, and occasional f***ing language. Listener discretion is advised. In 3, 2, 1.
And rolling sound, quiet.
Sweet.
Good day, good world. You're tuned to Subgenre, a podcast about the movies. I'm your host, Josh Dasal. On Subgenre, we get specific about films outside the main categories, and in Season 1, we're exploring the briny depths of submarine movies. In today's episode, we're going for an unexpected and nail-biting sea cruise in a stolen U-boat. This movie stars Oscar-winning Lincoln salesman Matthew McConaughey, Game Over man Bill Paxton, and the wolf himself, Harvey Keitel, in a World War II-era ocean thriller. All right. It's U-571. And joining me by Zoom to chat about this big screen battle pick is a celebrated writer. He writes for the stage, he writes for the page, he writes for video games. That didn't rhyme, but I tried. And he's a man who I think has pretty serious opinions about tacos as well. It's Allan Maule. Hey, Allan.
Hey, Josh. Great to be here.
Good to have you here. I'm so happy to be sitting down with you and talking about U-571 because as I found out in the process of asking you to do this show, you're like a big U-571 fan.
I did see this movie multiple times in the theater as a young man, and part of that was it was the year 2000. We didn't have streaming video. We didn't have iPhones, and so what did a bunch of teenage guys do when they didn't have dates on a Friday night? They went down to the Concord Mills multiplex, and we watched a submarine movie.
Where did you grow up?
In Charlotte, North Carolina.
In Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah, it was a like a discount mall that was close to my neighborhood in North Charlotte. So one of the few big movie theaters when stadium seating was a novelty. We all rolled down there.
You got to have stadium seating when you go to see submarine movies. I'm behind you 100% on that one. So I must confess, this is the first time I have seen this movie. So I know this thing, it came out a long time ago. I know you're a big fan. I know that is probably a sin somewhere, but this was my first time watching it. So I hope you're proud of me.
Yes, I am deeply proud of you because the thing I always would tell people about U-571 is everyone's got movies that they loved when they were a young person. And then when they watch them when they're an adult, it brings them a different kind of perspective. You know, when you watch movies about teenagers beating the crap out of like grown men in ninja movies as a kid, when you watch it as an adult, all of the editing looks terrible. You're like, I don't know why I ever thought this was good. Sometimes movies are better when you see them as an adult. I mean, I like the Sound of Music fine as a kid, but watching it as an adult, you're like, oh, I get why this is a classic. The cinematography is beautiful. The songs work great. U-571 is the rare movie that I feel the exact same way about it now that I did when I was 17 watching it for the first time. Like, it just takes me back because it's a thematically uncomplicated World War II sub flick. It's got a good plot. The action scenes are nice and tense, and the production values have a good amount of polish on it.
Well, the thing I want to know before we dive too deeply into this film is, am I proper to say U-571, U-571? Is there a specific way that we are supposed to be saying this?
Everyone in the film says U-571, Josh. And who are we to disagree with a Nazi submarine captain and all of his crew?
Never, you know what I was going to say? Never disagree with Nazis. Always disagree with Nazis.
Always
disagree with Nazis.
Except when it comes to how you pronounce the name of the titular sub.
Well, speaking of titular subs, but I turn it over to you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this film? Give us the setup. What are we watching?
Sure thing. So it was the year 2000. You can imagine that in the Conan O'Brien voice if you want. You know, it had the great Matthew McConaughey, like before he became like the spokesman for Lincoln and won an Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club. This was after Dazed and Confused, though. So, you know, you just imagine him being like, I need to do something more serious. I've got to be an aspiring captain of a submarine.
Oh, yeah.
And you got Bill Paxton, as made famous by his Game Over Man line in Aliens, plays the sterling captain that Matthew McConaughey looks up to, and Harvey Keitel, the wolf himself from Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, plays the chief, who's kind of like the top like non-com officer that works with these guys in the submarine.
It's a good cast. We can say that.
Oh yeah, as long as you don't need to have any women involved that you would recognize by name, this is a great movie. I love it. Like, I mean, I don't love it, but it's like I completely accept that they're like they didn't even make an attempt to pass the Bechdel test. I think like 2 women get to speak in the entire movie, and they're gone in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think we had a similar conversation about Crimson Tide, and I believe we could probably have the same conversation about nearly every submarine film that we were going to cover this season, save one. And I'm telling you, there is a market for an all-female submarine flick. So get on that.
To get made, yeah.
We got a cast to die for. We got a director on this, Jonathan Mostow. What do we know about Jonathan Mostow?
Yeah, so you might recognize his name from Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, also known as the one that Arnold Schwarzenegger cashed in on long after the second one came out. He also directed Breakdowns.
Killer movie.
Some big blockbuster films that lots of people saw. Produced by Dino and Marta De Laurentiis, who did Flash Gordon, Barbarella, and Hannibal with Anthony Hopkins.
And then you do Flash Gordon and Barbarella, and then the obvious follow up to those two eventually is a submarine flick with Matthew McConaughey. Yeah.
Director Mostow also worked together with Sam Montgomery and David Ayer, who was the screenwriter for Fast and the Furious and Training Day, to put together the screenplay for this bad boy.
So we're working on, I think it was like a $60+ million budget they had on this thing. And that's in 2000. That's pretty good money for making a flick.
Indeed. Yeah. Like the production values on this one, I think, are like one of my favorite things about it. It ages very well in that regard. And to date, it sounds like it grossed to like, just north of 120 million worldwide. So they made their money back. Which is
great. That's what you want to do.
It's exactly what you want to do, especially if you want to be asked to make movies again. It's always nice when the person that pays you actually gets a return for their work.
That's right. And they got an Oscar. They got an Oscar
for best sound editing.
Editing.
It's like, I'm not sure if anyone got into this because I mean, one of the things I love about this movie is I feel like it had its ambitions set at a very like safe place. So you know that they had to be happy to have walked away with an Academy Award for this one because they were like, this is a workman-like effort from a lot of the people that are involved. But they knew exactly what they were making and they executed on it.
It sounds like we've got on paper at least, or from the mouth of Allan Maule, we have a great movie sitting in front of us to pay attention to. So maybe let's talk about our feature presentation. Our feature presentation today, of course, is U-571. In a nutshell, a story about kind of like a heist of a submarine trying to find an Enigma code machine story meets like a road movie. It's an interesting combination of things.
Who among us has not stolen someone's vehicle and then realized it was a much worse vehicle than it actually was?
Absolutely. Every vehicle I steal, by the way, has an Enigma code machine inside. It just tends to work out that way. This one, of course, starts in the spring of 1942. This is kind of height of World War II, Atlantic Ocean. We'll call them hijinks with submarines chasing one another. Hitler's U-boats are sinking ships all over the Atlantic, like 1,000 Allied ships are getting sunk. And part of the reason that is possible is because the Nazis have an unbreakable code. And the codes that the U-boats are sending back and forth to one another are encoded and decoded by what's called an Enigma code machine.
Yeah, the Enigma was a real thing. That was something that the Allies struggled to figure out how they were going to break. And so if you, like me, have spent any amount of time on a Saturday afternoon bored on the History Channel, you have probably seen something about the Enigma code machine pop up.
I have indeed. We start out actually with the Germans, which is kind of an interesting place to start out in this movie instead of with our American friends. But we start out with a German sub. They're on the hunt. They find a destroyer, which they engage. They engage something. What do they engage at the beginning? They engage something. They destroy it, boom. But behind them, oh no, there's a torpedo that comes at them, I guess, then from the destroyer behind them. And so they are trying to get away from it. It's just this big action scene that starts everything, which, by the way, has this amazing piece of action in it I never really thought about, which was, how do you get a sub back then to dive super deep really fast? You rush all your guys from one end of the submarine to the other one and put all the weight on one side.
You got to make it heavy.
You got to make it heavy.
The captain even eats an orange in order to add some extra mass before he runs to that end of the ship. That is the level of detail that he's bringing.
That was quite honestly one of my favorite, right here in the beginning of the movie. That was one of my favorite things that I got to watch, was all these guys running to sort of make this submarine tilt on end and go down faster so they can get away from the depth charges, which is great. So they do it, the sub dives, everybody sits in silence, waiting to see if they're going to die or not. We end up with some explosions.